my friends. I've spent a lifetime behind a bench. I've seen people at their best, and their worst. I've seen smiles, tears, anger, regret, and redemption. All inside the walls of one small courtroom. And if there's one truth I've learned after all these years, it's this. The greatest law we can ever follow is the law of humanity. It isn't written in any book. It isn't taught in law school. And it can't be enforced by any police officer. It's written in our hearts. The human side of justice. When most people think about a courtroom, they imagine punishment, discipline, and authority. They see a place where mistakes are tallied, where wrongs are measured, and where the guilty must pay their price. But what I've learned is that a courtroom can also be a place of healing, of understanding, and of grace. Because behind every traffic ticket, every unpaid fine, every violation, there's a story. A story of someone who's fighting battles we can't always see. I remember once, a young man stood before me. He looked tough, tattoos, hard eyes, defiance in his voice. He was angry, ready to argue his case. But as I looked closer, I saw something else: fear. Fear of failure. Fear of judgment. Fear of being seen as less than human. So instead of lecturing him, I asked one simple question. "Son, what's going on in your life?" And just like that, the anger disappeared. He told me his father had just passed away. He'd been skipping work, missing payments, falling apart. His tough face crumbled, and tears filled his eyes. I could have fined him. I could have made an example out of him. But that day, I chose humanity. I said, "You've lost enough, son. Go home, take care of yourself. The fine is dismissed." He cried right there in front of everyone. And you know what? That wasn't weakness, that was healing. That was justice with a heart. The law of humanity. The law of humanity doesn't ask, "What rule was broken?" It asks, "What pain led to the mistake?" It doesn't separate us by what we've done. It connects us by what we feel. And the truth is, every one of us is carrying something heavy. Some carry debt, some carry loss, some carry guilt. But we all carry the need to be understood. In my courtroom, I've met people who said, "Judge, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do wrong, I just didn't know what else to do." And I tell them, "You know what? That honesty, that's worth more than money." We live in a world where people are quick to judge, but slow to understand. Quick to punish, but slow to forgive. Quick to speak, but slow to listen. And yet, the greatest power we hold as human beings is not the power to punish. It's the power to forgive. Mercy is strength. Mercy is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. It takes courage to forgive. It takes faith to look beyond a person's mistake and see the human being underneath. There's a story I often tell my students. One morning, an elderly woman came to court, barely able to walk, holding her cane, and trembling as she stood before me. Her ticket was for speeding in a school zone. The fine was small, but her guilt was heavy. She said, "Judge, I didn't mean to speed. My husband's sick. I was rushing him to his doctor." I looked at her, fragile, sincere, and heartbroken. And I thought of my own mother. And I said, "Ma'am, you did something out of love. That's not a crime, that's humanity." I dismissed the case. And she started crying. Not because of the fine, but because someone understood. Sometimes, all a person needs is not punishment, but understanding. We all stand before the same judge. No matter who we are, rich or poor, young or old. We all make mistakes. And someday, we'll all stand before the ultimate judge. Not in a courtroom made of stone and wood, but before God Himself. And He won't ask, "How many laws did you enforce?" He'll ask, "How many lives did you touch? How much compassion did you show?" Because in the end, justice without compassion is cruelty, and mercy without understanding is emptiness. But when justice and mercy walk hand in hand, That's humanity. A little kindness goes a long way. I remember a case years ago. A man came into court with his little daughter. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. She held his hand tightly as he stood trembling before me. He had several parking tickets, he was unemployed, struggling to get by. As I spoke to him, his daughter looked up at me, her eyes wide and full of hope. I asked her name. She said, Sophia. I asked, Sophia, should your dad have to pay these tickets? She shook her head and said, No, Judge. He's a good man. The courtroom laughed softly. And I smiled. Because in that moment, the truth came from the smallest voice in the room. I said, Sophia, I believe you. Your dad's a good man. Let's help him out. And I reduced his fine. That little girl hugged her dad so tightly. You could feel her relief in the air. That hug, that pure love, was worth more than any dollar amount. That's humanity in its simplest form. The ability to lift someone's burden, even if it's just a little, the ripple of compassion. We underestimate how far one act of kindness can travel. A smile, a kind word, a little mercy. It spreads further than we'll ever see. When you forgive someone, you don't just free them, you free yourself. You free your heart from anger, your mind from bitterness, and your soul from pride. In my courtroom, I've seen people come back years later. Not to fight another ticket, but to say thank you. They'll say, Judge, that day you forgave me, it changed how I live. And I realized then, that small moment of compassion planted a seed. And that seed grew into something beautiful. That's why I say, never underestimate the power of kindness. The world doesn't get better by laws alone. It gets better when people live those laws with love. The story of a homeless man. One winter, a homeless man was brought in for trespassing. He had been sleeping in an abandoned building to stay warm. Technically, he broke the law. But when I looked at him, I saw exhaustion, hunger, and pain. I asked, Why were you there? He said softly, Judge, it was cold. I had nowhere else to go. Now I could have found him. But how do you find a man who has nothing? Instead, I called a local shelter and found him a bed. I said, Tonight you sleep warm. That's my sentence. He started crying. He said, Judge, no one's talked to me like a human in months. That moment reminded me. Sometimes justice means not punishment, but protection. Not accusation, but affection. We can't fix the world in one day. But we can make someone's day feel like the world. We're all connected. Every person you meet is fighting a battle you can't see. That's why empathy is so powerful. It's the bridge between hearts. When you treat someone with respect, you're saying, I see you. You matter. And the truth is, we all matter. Every life has value. Every person deserves a chance to be seen, heard, and loved. I often tell people, if you want to make the world a better place, you don't need money or fame. You just need to start with understanding. If someone's rude, maybe they're hurting. If someone's impatient, maybe they're scared. If someone's silent, maybe they're carrying too much. See them not for what they do, but for what they've been through. That's the essence of humanity. The power of forgiveness. Forgiveness is the language of the soul. It heals what punishment can't. When you forgive, you give others a second chance. But more importantly, you give yourself peace. There's a man I once found who came back years later with flowers. He said, Judge, that day you treated me with kindness changed my life. I'm sober now, I have a family. And he said something I'll never forget. You didn't just forgive my fine, Judge. You forgave my failure. That's when I realized. True justice doesn't end with a verdict. It begins with compassion, the legacy of humanity. Someday, my time on the bench will end. The courtroom will be quiet. The gavel will rest. And when that day comes, I don't want to be remembered for how many cases I won, or how many fines I issued. I want to be remembered for how many hearts I touched, for how many people left my courtroom feeling seen and not condemned. Because laws change with time. But humanity never expires. What the world needs now. Our world today is divided. By politics, by culture, by belief. We argue, we shout, we forget to listen. But the truth is, we all want the same thing. To love, to be loved, and to belong. If we can start seeing each other as brothers and sisters, instead of strangers or enemies, we can heal the wounds of the world. It starts small. With a smile, with patience, with grace. The smallest act of kindness can echo for generations. You never know who you're inspiring, who you're lifting, who you're saving, just by being kind. The judge within. We all carry a little judge inside us. Every time we look at someone and decide what we think they deserve, that's the judge speaking. But remember, when you judge someone, you define them by their worst moment. When you show mercy, you define them by their potential. And humanity is about potential. The potential to change, to grow, to forgive, to love. So I ask you today, when you meet someone struggling, when you see someone fall, don't be the one who kicks them down. Be the one who helps them rise. Final reflections. I've seen the face of humanity. In the tears of a mother, the laughter of a child, and the trembling voice of a man asking for one more chance. And every time, I've learned something new about love. We can't always control justice. But we can always choose compassion. We can't always change laws. But we can always live by a higher law, the law of humanity. And that law says, when you can choose between being right and being kind, choose kindness. When you can choose between pride and peace, choose peace. And when you can choose between revenge and forgiveness, choose forgiveness. Because in the end, our humanity is not measured by how we treat the powerful, but how we treat the powerless. Soft music swells, and when we finally stand before the divine judge, he won't ask how much money we made, or how many titles we earned. He'll ask one simple question. Did you love? So, my friends, live with compassion, forgive freely, and always act in the name of humanity.